Okay, if I may, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough, who we are, where we come from. So our founders are from a company called Smarts, which was bought by EMC, and they used to do root cause analysis. And while they were there, they came up with this idea, which was around how do we improve the infrastructure? Because essentially what they were looking at was that when they were at EMC was that virtualization was growing, it was going to get a lot more complex, and with complexity becomes cost. So the challenge is that as everybody becomes more and more virtualized, how do we manage that? And how do we make sure that the applications perform to the levels that the customer expects? Okay? They came up with this idea when they were at EMC was to build this company, and EMC, for different reasons, decided they didn't want to go ahead with it. So they came away and they formed this company. The guys that were originally funded VMTurbo, funded Smarts, funded VMTurbo. We grew very, very rapidly. We've got around about 1,500 customers globally, but essentially we took $50 million out of Iconic Ventures, which is Facebook. Okay? And then we took another $2 million just recently from Red Hat. And the reason that everyone's joining in the fun with VMTurbo is because of this. If you think about the sprawl now of applications, and if you think about how that's affecting the way everybody trades today, if your application doesn't perform, the chances are you'll start losing revenue. Okay? If you then think about how that's applied across the infrastructure now, our infrastructure sprawl is just growing and growing and growing. And as Tony said, the complexity around how do I control that infrastructure, how do I manage the application service back to my clients becomes ever more increasingly difficult. So what VMTurbo is doing is it's looking at the demand of the application, which is at the very, very top, and it's looking at the supply of the infrastructure. And what we're doing through a very clever piece of software is automating that whole process. So we're making sure in real time that any changes that you need to make, okay, are made without any disruption to you. So if it's a CPU, if it's memory, if it's storage, we'll make those changes for you, okay, in real time, and essentially we're managing all the flows of that data. So your application is always running its optimum performance whilst maintaining the maximum utilization of your infrastructure. If you think about how you do that manually, it's more or less impossible. If you think about the hundreds of thousands of workloads that go across your infrastructure, everybody uses an application differently. If I use my email or I use a CRM tool like Salesforce, the way I will use it will be different to the people I work with. And it's the same for every single workload. It has its own separate DNA. So if you imagine now you're trying to manage that physically, you try and make a change for you, it's going to be very, very hard. Because every change you make has a knock-on effect within your infrastructure. So VMTurbo is trying to balance out between that infrastructure full and how the applications run. And it's changing all the time. And this is what we do, and we do it automatically. So the gaps are these. If I think about how we manage it today, in this scenario, it's kind of like a break-fix world. You know, we put a solution in and it runs really, really well. And then all of a sudden we get some alerts. Okay? And we might get hundreds of thousands of alerts. How do we know which ones are the right ones? You know, we could probably put them in a file somewhere, and then eventually something will happen, something will break, and we'll go and fix it. Okay? And then it will go back into the same cycle again. Application runs really, really well. It will get a few more monitoring alerts, and then all of a sudden something will break. And then the only time we really start kicking in and trying to fix it is if it's the application goes down and it's someone important in the business. It could be a trading application, it could be an online application, it could be something that's attributed to revenue. And all of a sudden, everybody's got to run around and try and fix it. Okay? And we get in this horrible loop. It just goes on and goes on and goes on. Okay? You wouldn't go on a plane if you knew it was going to fail. You wouldn't keep buying your cars if you knew it kept breaking. So why do we accept it in IT? If you then think about the applications, you know, when an application fails, same thing happens. We go back into this horrible break-fix cycle. And it's carrying on. So if you think about, again, as virtualization starts to grow and it starts to spread, most customers now are somewhere between 50 and 90% virtualized. It's happening. If we then think about how the utilization works, you know, we grow our technology today. We grow it from the ground up. You know, we sell some storage. You know, we configure that into certain size LUNs. Okay? We don't necessarily configure that to go and meet an application. We'll just say, okay, you want a petabyte of storage? Fantastic. I want some replication? Another petabyte of storage. I want to back it up? Okay, I'll back it up. It's great for us as manufacturers because people want to keep buying it. But the reality is the utilization starts to go down. So we have all this spare capacity here, okay, that's just left. How cool would it be is if I could be a lot more succinct in how I manage those workloads so I could give that capacity back? How cool would it be to give to one of your customers where they're going out for a budget and they go back to the financial director and says, actually, I don't need any more money this year. I've got enough capacity in my infrastructure today to manage what I need. And finally, if I think about software licensing, if I know where all my workloads are placed across my infrastructure and it's based on exact number of CPU, memory, storage, IOPS, if I know exactly where that is, guess what? I may not need to buy more servers, or I may be able to decommission servers. Because if you think about VMware licensing, Oracle licensing, SQL licensing, it touches all of the infrastructure. If I'm not using it, why do I need to pay licensing costs for it? Why do I need to power it on? Why do I need to manage it? These are all costs that are there that we're paying for, we don't necessarily need. And this is how I've been managing it. I've been sat in a rack, I've been trying to figure out where the cables go, it just goes on. So what VMTurbo is doing is this, and this is the best thing about the product, okay? So for any partner that's selling our software, this is what you get. You put our software in, okay, and we build a heat map, essentially. And what this heat map tells us, it tells us the temperature of all the VMs. The red circles will denote they're overutilized, okay? The farther they are to the right, it essentially means there's no more capacity. The greens were good. The size of the circle tells me how big the VMs are. Now I can click on any of those circles, and behind it will give me a bunch of recommendations. And it might be it's CPU, it might be memory, it could be IOPS, okay? And I can make a change there, and all of a sudden I'll see some shrinkage. Now for a partner, the best thing about this is that if I put this into any one of my accounts and I show my customer this, I've now got control. Because I can say to my customer, if you do this and you use VMTurbo and we make the recommendations, I can move into this. Now essentially what I've done is I've made sure that my application workload's running. I've made sure that where I've got a case where it's overutilized, I've made some changes there. I've now freed up some space. Now this is actually from an actual customer screenshot. This is from what they call a closed cluster. So this cluster has no more capacity. So according to VMware, it says there's no more room. So if I click into vCenter, this is what it will show me. If I then look in vCenter, it now shows me this. Everything's all nice and clean. From the recommendations I've made, we gave the customer back 33% capacity. Okay? Now for you guys, all your customers will be over-provisioned, for sure. If you put this in, show them this, okay? You simulate it, there's no agents, there's no changes to be made, you can simulate this. So you can show them what they've got today, and you can show them what they can have tomorrow. Now if you're a tactical supplier to an account, this is great, because now all of a sudden you go back up the food chain, you start talking to business about this is the value I can show you. If they've got budget and they're going to buy some more servers, some more memory, or some more storage, you can stop the sale. How cool is that? Mr. Customer, you don't need to buy anything else. You've got enough capacity. If you're the strategic supplier to the account, and you've got someone coming and knocking on the door saying, hey, I want to sell you some more storage or some more servers, you can say, well, actually, you don't need to. You can manage the account either way. Okay? So going back to the capacity slide I was showing you, when we look at our workloads, if you imagine it's a bit like Tetris, you know, as we're trying to build out our plan, how we work out where those workloads go, there's always capacity. So not, often or not, when we talk to our customers at the end of a proof of concept, we show them what, on that previous slide, which is, this is what you have today, this is what you have tomorrow, but I can actually show you this is where your capacity is. On average, the gain that most customers see is around 40%. Okay? Now that effectively means when you go back into your customer, is that when you're saying to them about what do I need to be buying in the future, because most customers have got a budget for this, okay, to buy more servers and more storage, if you can say to them, you don't need to do this, you change your whole conversation because you're going from the top of the workload all the way down to the storage. You can see actually from the application all the way down to the spinning disk. So when we start making recommendations, we're making these recommendations for every part of the infrastructure that touches that workload. That's completely unique. Nothing else does this. And it does it all in real time. There's not a single degradation of service at all. Customers like Cisco, EMC and HP don't buy into companies like us if our technology doesn't work. We're taking on roughly 100 net new customers a quarter. That's how compelling this suddenly becomes. We'll do a business case for you as well. So, as most manufacturers will say to you, we can do you a return on investment. And as most partners and most salespeople will say, I'm not really sure about that. How do you know? It's just a marketing thing. The reality is when you put the software in, now you're looking at their data. Everything you're doing is based on their data. Every change, every simulation you make is on their data. At no point do you make an assumption that this is potentially what we can do. You can show them what you're doing. Nothing else does that. And then when it comes down to doing the return on investment, well, they'll tell you how much do you pay for a server? How much do you pay for a license? How much do you pay for storage? They'll tell you. We'll put it into a spreadsheet for you. You'll see all those figures, and then we'll tell you how much money you're going to save. Because if you're going to give them this capacity back, return on investment is 3 months. I think there was a study done just recently. They went out to our customer base, and it was done by something like Tech Target, I believe. And 91% of the customers we spoke to return on investment within 3 months. And again, the best thing about this is that when you're justifying this to a client, what they've got, you're talking about their data at every single point. At no point are you changing it. At no point are you saying, oh, well, I think you're going to get this. Hang on, I'll put a finger in the air. Okay? And you can see, if I now think about projection, how much more are you going to be buying over the next 12 months? We were at an event yesterday with BigTec, and a customer came up to us, or a prospect came up and said, I'm quite interested in what you have. My estate's roughly 3,000 VMs. I said, okay, that's great. How much do you think you're going to grow next year? And he said, well, I think we're probably going to put another 300 to 400 virtual machines in next year. I said, do you have budget for that? He said, yes, I do. I said, do you know if you've got capacity in your infrastructure to take that now? And they went, I don't know. I said, well, would you like to know? I said, if we could tell you that you have enough capacity there today, you could use that budget for something else. And he said, well, that'd be great. There'd be nothing better for me to be able to show them a return on investment that what I've been spending historically, I've actually got enough capacity to meet my business demand. And again, if he goes back to his financial director and says, hey, I don't need any more money, or I don't need more money for this because I've got the capacity for it, how cool is that? It just becomes so easy, and for partners to go and sell to customers, it's a new conversation. Okay? It's a very easy process. It's a download. Within 15 minutes, you start getting value. Within 15 minutes, you can start showing them, this is what I can save you. And here's just a few of the customers. So these are the bigger customers we've got, naturally. You know, we're going to show you those. But we have lots of customers in the mid-market. Our mid-market growth is huge. As I'm saying, you know, it's 100 net new customers a quarter. We've been going for 4.5 years. We're growing rapidly. You know, revenues are trebling year on year. And they're only growing that fast because the software does what it says. You know, I was very lucky. I worked for a company called Riverbed a few years ago, and we started that company up. And one of the things that we used to do was do things with sort of almost like smoke and mirrors. You know, we'd show them how fast we could move data across the network, and we'd do a few clever things to make it look really, really good. With this, there's nothing. You know, once you put it in, you show them the value of what you have, the customer starts buying into that. All of a sudden, you just move straight up the food chain. Now you start talking about the value. The costs then start to become irrelevant, almost to a point, because if you're showing them they're going to save the money within 3 months, the cost goes out the window. If you think about you're going to move your customers now into maybe web scale, as Tony was talking about, or into hyper-converged, you know, that's a big step change for a lot of customers. Well, what would be nicer is to say to them, or one of the nicer ways of doing it, is why don't we just take you on this journey? Why don't we show you what you have today, and if you move into this new world, this is how you do it. And this is how we de-risk it for you. Which workloads need to go onto that platform? Okay? Which workloads need to go into the cloud? Why don't we show you how you do that? What would be the easiest way for you to be able to do that? Rather than saying, okay, I'm moving from this world to this world, how do I do it? You put the software in, it shows you what you need to move. It also shows you how much more density you can get. So if you go to Nutanix, for example, we have an integration with Nutanix, we'll drive an additional 40% density on average onto that platform. So again, if you want to move them into Nutanix, okay, nice story, okay, Mr. Customer, you want to go into hyperconverged, this is the platform of choice. By the way, the return on investment for this is going to be whatever Joel tells you, but I can add another 40%. It's just another way you can justify moving these customers. And all customers now are going to start moving this way. If you think about the announcement that was made last week around EMC and Dell, the established order's going. There are lots of customers out there now that have put off buying Nutanix, buying other infrastructure products because they thought they were going to be buying EMC. Now they're going, I'm not so sure. Same thing with VMware. If you want to move from a hypervisor now, lots of people are now moving to OpenStack. One of the biggest challenges you're going to have if you put a management tool in that's all VMware, what happens if I move? I can't port those management tools. If you use the VMTurbo platform, it doesn't matter what platform you have. It can be VMware, it can be Hyper-V, it can be Xen, it can be OpenStack, it can be containers, it doesn't matter. We work with them all. So whether your customer wants to go on this journey from where they are today, they want to go up moving into this new world, you can take them with you. And that's it.